Broker Chat birthday edition because it is August, it is hot, it rains every day at 4 o'clock in East Cobb, and I'm celebrating the entire month. So, any other August babies on this call?
Well, I am. My birthday was August 1st.
Woohoo! You started it off great. Happy belated birthday.
Thank
I always joke, my husband's July 31st and I'm August. So we're kind of those Thanksgiving, Christmas babies,
you.
if you know what I mean.
Oh, yes. Oh, gosh, yes.
So anyway, but we just happen to be, you know, in that month where everyone's thinking about going back to school. And I think Fulton County and maybe DeKalb County started today. So there may be some individuals that are dealing with that today. So I didn't know I was doing broker chat today. So no big deal. I revamped my plans and I do have a call right at 1. So we will stop about 5 minutes to get any last minute comments or questions. And hopefully this will be a great one for you. So I like teaching 1 or 1 million, it doesn't matter. Someone will leave here better than they came. So if you are new to this Zoom, this is a monthly call done twice, or Zoom done twice a month. I do one day, one Monday, and Tom, your qualifying broker, does the other. And this is for the entire heart of Atlanta, not just Midtown, but the heart of Atlanta, to come on. And usually I will have a subject matter when Tom and I see a lot of compliance issues going on, or if I get lots of broker calls on the same type of subject. Today, I just thought I'd hear your questions and your concerns and share, like I did about AI, what I'm doing and what's happening on the streets right now that's got you perplexed. I've got a great one I can share with you, but I want to hear what you guys have to say. So if you don't know who I am, my name's Deborah Blue, just like the color. And I also celebrated my 27th year in the business, July 31st. So I have to pick a new age because I'm only 27. So I don't know how that's going to work. We'll pretend. Anyway, all right. Who's got the first question or statement, or what's your burning questions?
I have a burning question. One of the reasons why I want to jump on.
Okay.
I've been hearing a lot about creative financing and different things that people are doing with creative financing. So I feel like sometimes when I finally figured out one thing, something new jumps out at me and I'm like, oh, what is this? How does it work? And how does it pertain to me being a realtor? How much do I need to know about this to tell my sellers or buyers? And how much of this do I just let the lender take care of? Because I don't know.
Good. That's an excellent question. Excellent question, because I have been sharing that with not only agents that have called me, but I have a lot of agents that are not with our company that call me, and I answer those questions very gingerly because I'm not their broker, but they know me from when I was at Century 21 or when I was over at East Cobb. So um, we have had markets that I just did a campaign on social media to express to people about mortgage rates, and is mortgage really a scary thing right now? Everyone's jumping out of the window because it's 6.9. Most of the 80s, and anybody who's on this call that purchased a home in the 80s, most of the 80s, our interest rate was double digits. And prior to that, there are people that have been in the business much longer than me that said, I got a 16% interest rate and was happy to have it. I think everyone would jump out of the building if they heard that right now, but it did exist and people still purchased. So if rates are at 6.9, and 3 years ago when we had the unicorn years, also known as pandemic and everything else that went along with that, 2%, 3%, 4% rates, those particular households have a lower interest rate and they're afraid to leave because it's such a good rate. But here's what I would encourage you to do. Let's talk on the listing side first. If you're going on a listing appointment and that homeowner says, gosh, I hate to leave this 2% or 3% or whatever, if they are really stuck on that, could they not assume someone else's 2 or 3% interest rate? Now, I want to preface that by saying it's a creative way of financing, but the loan may not be assumable, but you don't know if you don't ask. And there are some out there. So what that looks like is you would have a listing appointment with the seller and say, were you lucky enough to get one of these great rates? I know it looks daunting to see 6.9 and leave 2.0. There's two different ways to do that. You can keep this one and rent it and take the money out and have that for your down payment for the higher rate, or buy that rate down if it's not too expensive. Or you could say, you know what, I could look for properties that may have, which you can find, Ishameen can help you with this in Remind, for people that have that type of interest rate that may want to move, but are afraid to move because they can't, they feel stuck in that 2%. So that's one way of talking to a seller. For a buyer, you could say, we could look for properties that you could buy and possibly assume. You still have, the way that it works, you still have a regular closing. It's just that say for instance, the person's been in the home 2 years on a 30-year. So now there's 28 years left on that at the lower rate. But you have to, excuse me, you have to talk to your loan officer about it. You may find some loan officers that have no idea what I'm talking about. This is because I've lived through markets that have done this before. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, I heard that they stopped doing assumables in 1989. You would be correct. However, there are still some instances out there that you can do that. Okay, you just have to find out, especially when it comes to VA loans. Okay, so
Question.
go right ahead.
When you assume a loan, do they also assume the equity that could be in the house as well?
They could assume some of the equity, because keep in mind, if you're going to buy someone's house and assume their loan, if they were to sell it regularly, they would sell it and the equity would come to them in the form of a check, correct?
Correct.
So if you're going to assume it, more than likely you're going to have to pay that seller for their equity.
Okay. Okay.
In the form of whatever price you offer, and say, oh, I'm going to offer you, $550. And also, by the way, closing costs are not based on a percentage like they are with a new loan. You have to find out from the lender and the mortgage company for assuming what it would cost. I did one many years ago, and our closing costs were $500. It was like a under $200,000 house when those existed in Powder Springs. However, our closing costs, and I believe it was FHA, and it was $500. And that person paid the seller whatever that amount was down, that went to the seller. And what the buyer inherited was a beautiful home in Cobb County, still with a little bit of equity and a lower interest rate. At the time, I think it was like 5, when rates might have been maybe, tap dancing on 7 or something like that. So just know that that's one way. Another way would be owner financing. So what happened in 2020 and 2021? There was lots of cash being thrown around. There's still lots of cash being thrown around. So there are homes that don't have mortgages on them. And maybe that person can afford to keep the home and take the equity out and owner finance it. So if you are lucky enough to be a seller, or you go to a listing appointment where the seller is interested in something like that, you still have a regular closing. It's just that now the seller is the bank. So the seller would need to keep up with the amortization chart, payments, all of that, however they do that, using QuickBooks or hiring an accountant or whatever. You would go to closing, everything would be the same, except for instead of Bank of America sending the money and the documents, you would go to closing. The closing attorney would set up the documents, and the seller would be the bank. And then those payments would be made directly to the seller at what interest rate. And we do have GAR forms for that. And they're seller financing. It doesn't matter. Okay. It could be a 10-year loan, a 7-year loan, a 15-year loan. And then at some point, if rates go down, or if the seller, I would suggest the seller use what's called a balloon loan to say, you know, I don't want this in my name forever. I'm not gonna be your bank for 30 years. Maybe you say it's 5, maybe you say it's 10, whatever the seller feels would make sense. And then the buyer could at some point, when they feel like the rates have reached the point of comfort for themselves, refinance it. It would pay off the seller and the rest of the money owed to them. And now that home is in the buyer's name. Sort of like what, is it Divvy? Yeah, they kind of do something like that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It
Okay,
does.
so those are 2 examples. There's lots of them, which I'll leave that to our wonderful partners in the office shelter and Supreme. I think they've had some, I think I've seen at least one class advertised where they talked about it. If they didn't, I would highly suggest that we speak to them about talking about all the different ways. There's wraparounds that's way back in the 70s and 80s that I don't think I've seen in a while, but I'm starting to hear they're coming back. Just little things like that. To answer your original question, as far as how much do you need to know? You need to know enough that they exist and a little bit how they work, and then find the right lender who understands it to make it happen. I wouldn't get a whole lender degree to figure it out.
Right. 'Cause I was like, "Phew, I got enough inside this brain already. I don't know if I can fit any more."
Yeah, and I will tell you this, you have more to learn. It never stops, because every time our market changes, something new pops up. So
Yeah.
look at
And
me,
this is
Chat GPT and AI. Who would have thought?
right. And with the market changing, these are some of the conversations I was starting to hear about people being more creative with the financing because of interest being up and different ways that you can kind of market to potential sellers to give them more options or let them know that there's more options out there outside of the traditional lending
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. And of course, you still want to go through the, you know, uh, back credit check and things of that nature. One that was also very popular when I first started in the business in the late 90s was soft seconds, sort of like what NACA and some of the other government programs, down payment assistance is a soft second. So maybe the buyer qualifies, but they can only get so much from the bank, and maybe the seller doesn't have or can afford to say, well, I'll loan you the 10,000 you need in order to close this deal. Then that seller would be the second mortgage, and that would be called a soft mortgage or a soft second, if you've heard that term before. I'm using slang. That's what we call it, but it's basically a second. Now, that's a little riskier because a seller might say, oh, I'm in second position, which it is. And if they were to stop paying on the first would foreclose and negotiate the second, or say, too bad. So that's the risky side of being in the second position. When I started, there were even third mortgages. I went to a closing one time that had a third mortgage. I'm like, wait, I know I sat in the room with you and asked, did you have a first and second? I never thought to ask, do you have a third? So I had a little surprise at closing, but it worked out just fine. Good question. Good conversation. Anyone else? Did anyone have an aha going, what? We can what? No? You already knew that? You guys are too quiet today. You forget this is the birthday edition. I expect more excitement.
Hi, Deborah.
Hi.
It's Janice and Scott. How are
Hey,
you?
Janice and Scott, how are you guys?
Okay, you
The
look
last time
wonderful.
we spoke, we were talking about land and a house, and we got it
Oh,
closed.
LJ, yeah, that was an experience.
Yeah.
We have a question. These discount brokerages that buy houses and then sell them, there's a couple of them here in Georgia, but how do they get around Georgia code, what is it, 51-6-2 with the seller's disclosure? I mean, Are the brokerages reporting them when they don't do this, or are we as agents who were working with them on the other side of the table? Do we report them for not using it? Or do they, I mean,
Well, know that well, I'm going to speak in broad terms, because when you say these companies that are buying properties, are they brokerages or are they not brokerages?
they are brokerages.
Okay. All right. So yes, you could, because if are they realtors or are they salespeople? Because we're under a board, and we fall under code of ethics and license law. So
Okay, so
report someone, and we go to our board or we go to GREC. And GREC, everybody hollers GREC. GREC doesn't, if somebody looks at you wrong, you don't call GREC.
Right.
But everybody thinks I'm going to call GREC. GREC will laugh at you. GREC is like a group of maybe 6 or 7 people, and there's 50,000 of us. So they leave that up to our boards for grievance committees and things of that nature when someone is violating something. And then they can decide, hey, you may want to escalate this to GREC as well.
Okay, well, specifically, we're talking about OfferPad.
And then, well,
Them not having a seller's disclosure, the GAR.
I just closed one 2 months ago and I had a seller's disclosure.
Was it the GAR form or was
Yeah.
it the form?
So when I need one, that's why the contract committee provided 2 types of disclosures. I call it the long version, and then the short version. And they created the short version because so many people like Relo, REO, investors don't want to fill anything out. And that short version is only 2 pages. And it's really just talking about defects.
Okay.
Because we do have to, whether you give a disclosure or not, you must disclose defects. Okay. So if you know that the house from inspection or something you see, and sometimes defects are hidden, you need to give that form. As the agent, you would, counter with that form to say, and my script is, my broker is going to require this for compliance. And when I say that, I don't really get any pushback, because I'm not saying you're supposed to, I'm not pointing you. No, my broker for compliance is going to require this. Can you go ahead and fill it out?
Okay.
Okay. Now, OfferPad may not want to fill out the long version, because the one that I had pretty much was filled out, but said, we know nothing about nothing. Right. You need to have an inspection. And that, turned out sad for my clients, because I told them to make sure you do a septic inspection, and they elected not to and ended up having to replace it. Yes. But when I went back to the seller's disclosure, they said, hey, we've never lived in the home. We suggest you get an inspection, blah, blah, blah. And they were covered, because the first thing they did was call me to say, can we go after them? I said, one moment, please, and pulled up the contract, because you know me, my middle name is, what does the contract say? And I remembered it did have something in there, but I couldn't quite quote it to them. And I opened it up and I said, remember on page blah, 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 it said, we didn't live here. We're a corporation. We have no idea if it's good, bad, or ugly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. You're very welcome. Good question. Who's next? These are not burning questions. Come on, give it to me. Amy, how are you? Come on, you've got a question. Somebody wants to know what's on your mind. How's everybody doing with their database right now? Are you touching it?
Well,
I am, because of this Shamina.
Well, I read a wonderful article this weekend. Let me throw this question out. Would you want 1,000 fans or 10,000 people who don't really know you but follow you and read your newsletters and so on and so forth? Which one would you want? 1,000 fans or 10,000 people that really don't know you, but they follow you, they read your newsletters, they take your postcards, they look at your social media, that type of thing? Which would you like?
I'm kind of different. I want them both, only because I know my 1,000 fans will always love me. They'll always be there. But there's only so much that I can get out of those 1,000 fans. There's only so many times they'll come see the same concert over and over again. So I kind of want to have that 1,000 fans, but I would really key and hone in on the 10,000 people that kind of like me, because I want to get to know them and convert them into another fan.
Excellent
I
question.
am,
I mean, excellent answer. Okay, I hear another person. Go ahead.
this is Mika. I'd
Hey,
rather go
Mika.
deep. Hey, I'd rather go deep than wide, because just like that concert you're talking about, Ishamina, I know someone who would go see Anita Baker every time she showed up, but a new
My
artist they
husband.
may not. Uh-huh. I have someone like that too. But then at the same time, they won't try out a new person because they're new and they're not tried and true. So I'd rather concentrate on what I know and go deep there.
I like it. I like it. Anyone else? One more.
I would do 1,000 fans too, just because they speak so highly of you. So it opens the door and takes down the wall of trust when they introduce you to someone else. So even though it's 1,000 fans, it doesn't limit me to those 1,000 fans, because they love me so much. They would be willing to do whatever for me. And I feel like those 1,000 fans can just multiply. Like how many how much they give.
Mhm. I agree. With Keller Williams, when we talk about the MRAA book, they describe what I just described as Mets and have not Mets. And I believe, and Ishimi can correct me, I think there's a program about 200 in your database, or 201 or something like that. I'm not quite sure what it's called. You can jump in and kind of, or put it in the chat what it's called. And I think Patrick has done that class. And then on Mondays, I believe they have like a Zoom talking about it or something like that. 201 Plus Club, yes. The article goes on to say 1,000 fans. There's nothing wrong with having 10,000 people. And speaking from having a database that's been as large as 8,000 people, I've narrowed it down to about 1,900 in my core. And the reason being, and I do this probably every 6 months to a year, because I really want to drill down. I think Mika said this. I really want to drill down and make those people your soldiers. And they need to know the latest and greatest. Like, you just learned something today about another way to finance. These type of people need to know this, because it may apply to them, or they may be talking around the water cooler about it. I didn't know that, but my realtor told me this. If you have raving fans constantly calling you, that, my database will say, what if I did this? What was that company you told me about? You said something in your newsletter. Where can I find that? Those are your fans. Those are the people that are going to send you referrals, even if they're calling you to ask, should I paint my living room? And what's the latest color? Should I paint it Barbie pink? That's going to be a negatory. Despite the fact that it's very popular, let's not do that. But at the end of the day, the 1,000 fans, if you think about 1,000 fans and you're trying to create a business where you are trying to control your budget, your time, your energy, could you not nurture 1,000 people over many years? Because here's the thing, that's where the fortune is made, in the people that know and love you. Yes, we need the have not mets, because that's how you continue to keep adding to your database. But you still need that VIP group that you can break down into 10s, 20s, and do something special for, whether you're sending them a Starbucks gift card to say, hey, I was thinking about you today, have a cup of coffee on me, or something like that, or sending them a birthday treat. I use a company called Bake Me a Wish, because they also donate to vets. And so that's a big thing for me. And they have birthday cakes and pies and cookies and brownies and things like that. Very inexpensive. You could send that to them. They bake the cakes overnight and it goes out fresh the next day. So, or sometimes the same day. So that's a site you might want to go to. It serves two purposes. And then I let them know you've donated blah, blah, blah to the military or something like that on your birthday. That's special. That's how you take care of people special. So if that's too expensive, you find something. Another one is loop and tie, if you've ever seen that before. You know, it's kind of like, if you've ever heard of Oriental Trading, is like a catalog of stuff, but maybe a better quality. It depends on the price point. They have things under $50 and things over $100, depending on the type of clientele you have, that you could just drop ship it to them and say, was thinking about you. Here's a nice mug. Maybe it has your logo on it or something funny on it or something like that. So the point is, are you nurturing that 1,000 group and letting them know? I love, love, love the stats that Brett is doing. I made a little reel, Facebook reel with the, I don't know what it's called. Shameen, help me here. It's a little gray boxes with all the counties showing if it's up, down. I don't know what the link is called, but Luke sent it to me last week, and I think the new one came out this week as well, but I haven't gone in to look at it. And I sent that to my database, and they were, you know, waiting for their county to see what's going on and report it back. Oh, this is great, or whatever the case may be. So it's just little things like that. It doesn't have to be a physical thing of cookies or cake or whatever. It could just be the information. They're thinking about it. Even if they're not ready to put a sign in the yard, they're thinking about it. They're hearing it every day. It's on the news, but they're not hearing it from you. And you are who they trust. Okay. They'll hear all kinds of things on the news and in the, you know, on social media, whatever, but we are boots on the ground on a daily basis. So if you're not using those tools in a way to touch your 1,000 or your 200 or whatever the case may be, keep thinking about the fans. So my goal is working on my database that I have those 1,000 fans. I've gotten my database down to 1,900. Those are true people, and working on, you know, kind of remarrying them again, if that makes sense, to say, hey, I'm here. Maybe you haven't heard from me in a while. I love it when my clients call me and go, I don't know if you remember me. Yeah, I do. Sold your house. When they say that, shame on me. Okay. And then I have those that I hear from like monthly, like, okay, here we go. What do you need this week? So figure out how you can create that balance of somebody is calling you every week or you're calling them. I love it when they call us. We all love it when they call us, but what are we doing to encourage that? So I loved that article. It reminded me, you know, it doesn't matter how long you've been in the business, you are constantly learning. You are constantly relearning. Hey, you know, I've let that slip through the cracks. Let's get back on that horse and you know, work on that group of 1,000 fans. So I give that to you today, that you might want to go back and look at your database and see what you're doing. And there are great campaigns in Command, setting those up. They go out, you know, every day I look at that, and in Command, it'll say, take me off the list. No problem. You're off the list. I'm not interested. No problem. You're not interested. When you have more choices, it's okay when people say, kick rocks. Anyone else? Hey, Althea. Althea just had a tough one that she finally closed. Congratulations.
Yes, finally.
Thank you for sending that photo. You know, you guys, when I help you, I'm always in the clouds as to, I wonder if that worked out. Every now and then, because I never get to hear it's like reading a bunch of novels and I never get to read the ending. So thank you, Althea, for letting me know how that worked out.
Yes, thank you so much for all your help and still taking my call.
Well, you used up all your July coins and we're in a whole different month now, so you're good.
Yes.
Any other comments, questions, burning questions, something going on out in the street that you're scratching your head going, How many of
I
you have
have-
heard, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. I know Keller Offers is not working anymore,
It's
right?
coming.
And
It's coming after
okay,
mega camp. We should hear something.
okay, and I know they shared another option at the market update. Has anybody worked with them before?
You're talking about iFinder?
Yes, I think so.
I'm certified. I've been using it since they came here to do the training, the first training. The second training, I think, was the end of July, and I think they did that virtually. I have probably submitted, I haven't had anything accepted yet. I think it's a great program in the interim. The only thing that I would say, it's not really a negative, but I would prefer to see better, is they don't give you an answer for 5 business days. So if I submit something on Friday, I'm not going to hear anything till next week. I have been able to request sooner. I needed one like in 3 days, and I did get an answer in 3 days, but I haven't had one that we've accepted yet. We've countered, they countered. So it's a good alternative. I think Keller Offers worked better for me and some of my own iBuyers that I have as far as investors. I think because they are new to our market, they started about a month earlier than they wanted to, so they, kind of scrambled at first, but I think they've got a rhythm going now. I would try it. Here's the thing, it's better than having nothing to offer. So if you are thinking about doing it, they don't have a buy box because they have so many investors in that group that will take everything from a burnout house to mobile homes, land, that kind of thing. It's a jambalaya, excuse me, a jambalaya of investors. So I would say, I would suggest trying it. I always submit cash offers before I list or anything like that, because hey, if we can sell it before it hits the market, that's a good thing. So
Okay, thank you. And
yeah, I don't know when, I don't know
would you
how
say-
the other one is going to come back. They are reformatting it, but I hear it's going to be announced after mega camp.
Okay, okay. So have you tried the offer pat? No, it's the open door where you connect them and give them a lead and they still give you a percentage.
I've done all of them.
And which
I've had
one's your favorite?
success. I've had success with them. You just have to, one of the things that I've always done that I think agents are not doing is negotiate. You think that you submit, they give it back, and then you go, oh, the seller said no. No, push back and say, I think that service fee needs to come down. I think that price needs to come up, and here's why. And I had one that was $12,000 service fee, and we came back and we said no, and they came back and brought it down to 7. So you can
Okay.
negotiate with those services. So don't think just because they give you an answer, that's the end of it. Yes, you can negotiate.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Anyone else? I'll tell you one that I think is, I don't think a lot of you have heard this term before, but you've probably heard it if you've been around me enough, or if you've had a situation and we talked about it. Does anybody know what anticipatory breach means? And have you done it? Are you guilty of it?
I just learned that term from you because of this last deal. That was my introduction to anticipatory breach, with the seller trying to breach on what he thought my buyer was going to do.
Mm-hmm. Anybody
I
else?
hadn't heard it before there.
Yep. So there's this little thing that you probably never learned in pre-license or anything unless you take contract classes like I do on the regular. And I believe Seth has a video on it. I meant to check before this Zoom. I think he has a video on it. Yeah, he does. If you go to YouTube, his YouTube's page, which all of you that have taken my contract class signed up for it, because that's the first thing we do before we start the class. and you type in the search bar anticipatory breach or just the word anticipatory, it should pop up. But basically, and I think agents are more guilty of anticipatory breach than the buyers and sellers, because anticipatory breach means we're going to close August 11th, this coming Friday. I think that's this coming Friday. And emotions get heated, and sometimes agents think a negotiating tactic is to say, we're not coming to closing if you don't fill in the blank, whatever it is you say. Is that anticipatory breach? Let's break it down to the word anticipatory, a derivative of the anticipation. So is that anticipatory breach if you try to say, we're not coming to closing because we don't like the quality of the repairs, the most popular one? What do you think?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Because what does the contract say about the quality of repairs? What does it say in the contract? Now everybody's going, oh my God, no, she did not say that because I don't know. Come on, you know. What survives the closing?
What survives the closing?
Yes. Using that example I just gave.
Maybe a survival clause, or like if some repairs need to be done after closing, where they've agreed that a contractor will get paid after closing.
Very good. So couldn't you say, okay, I know you're not satisfied. That shouldn't stop the loan because we have a clear to close. The appraiser didn't say there was a problem with it. And now you're doing your walkthrough and you don't like the repairs. Well, always remember, repairs start with the ATAC or the right to inspect. And Seth also has a video on that. Most of the time, agents want to send you the report and let you decide, or the seller decide, not you, but the seller decide how to repair things, instead of writing proper sentences to say, that piece of wood around the dining room window is rotted and needs to be replaced with another 2x4 painted white and sealed, caulked and sealed. That's giving proper instruction on how to repair something. The survival clause is already in our purchase and sale agreement that says, and everybody needs to go and read it after this, that says, here, these things survive. Now, do we have a form that we could say, these following things will survive and need to be completed no later than August 15th, and the attorney is going to hold $5,000 of your proceeds until August 15th for me to come back and make sure everything is done properly. And if it's not done properly, then you forfeit that $5,000 and I'll fix it myself. Does that sound like I closed the loop?
Yes.
Does that sound like a seller might go, I don't want $5,000 held. Why don't I have my contractor come over? Anytime my husband and I have sold a home and we had to do any repairs, we invite the buyer over. One time we had a crack in our basement and we had to have people come out to fix it, pump concrete in, do all these different things. We didn't even know it was there. It was a small one, but it was there. And we invited them out so they could see it done. Not to add more work. Now, I've noticed that people we had a situation where the buyer came over and told the contractor to do this and this and this, and the contractor charged the seller. Well, the seller only hired the contractor to do this for this amount of money. The buyer or the buyer's agent doesn't get to come over to the house and say, oh, by the way, can you add an extension on to close that patio in? We'd like to have a closed in. You can't do that. So if you're doing that, stop it. You're more than welcome to say, hey, contractor, you're doing a great job. Will you come back after closing and put this addition on or close this patio and we'll pay you separate? Or if they want it done while they're there, That's not a bad idea either, but that's a side deal. You say, you know, I want you to do this and I'm going to pay the difference at closing. All right. But yeah, the whole thing in a nutshell is inspection items survive, or can, I should say, because a lender's not going to say, this can't close because you're not happy with the paint strokes. That's cosmetic. And so that's why I remember when I first started teaching contracts at Midtown, and everyone was shocked to learn that the inspection ATAC was supposed to go to the lender, which is mortgage fraud when you don't do it. And the reason being is if there is anything in there that the underwriter needs to see or the appraiser needs to see that goes against the policies of the particular loan, or if there's a safety or code, or, you know, not necessarily code, but mostly safety or deterioration, then they're going to, the appraiser would say, hey, this appraises for $550. However, the wood around the windows that's rotted has to be replaced in order for me to sign off on this completely. Then that's called a condition of the appraisal. Okay. And very seldom do you ever get that, do you? You know, because it meets the criteria. Go ahead. Someone was talking.
So, yes, I'm sorry. So when you say the lender has to get the ATAC, the lender has to get the ATAC as it's presented or as it's returned, agreed upon? Agreed upon.
Because okay. What is it, the ATAC an amendment?
Yes.
And the lender is supposed to receive all amendments, correct?
Correct.
Yes, that's why. But when I first started teaching in Midtown, and I said it the first time, I had more puzzled looks like, or I would hear, I don't hear it too much anymore. I would hear, well, the other agent said, we don't need to send that to the lender. If an agent tells you that, that means they know they've had a deal fall apart because they sent the ATAC. So they figure, well, let's not send it so it won't mess up the deal. That's called mortgage fraud. Please do not participate. So going back to anticipatory breach, who has experienced, if you want to, you don't have to raise your hand or speak up, but who would like to speak up about, I've experienced this anticipatory breach thing. I have.
Oh, I most definitely have. This last one, the agent said that we could ask for, and maybe this isn't, but I took it as anticipatory breach. She said, if you do such and such, my client is not going to close. My client is not going to do that. Before she even asked her client to do the thing, and I forget what it was. It was signed something, or I can't even remember the instance, but she said, no, my client's not going to do that. I'm going to tell you right now, he's not going to do that. Well, he ended up doing it. And the first one was, he's not going to extend the closing. Well, my buyer and seller met each other, had coffee, and everything was fine. They extended it. They talked amongst themselves and said, here's the paperwork we want you to file, give us the amendment, and we're good. And then we had to push it one more day. And she insisted, my co-op agent insisted, it's never going to work. This is what's going to end the deal. You don't even ask him. I said, oh no, I'm going to ask because I'm asking you that, you know, and she has to present it because we asked. And then they ended up circumventing it amongst themselves anyway, the buyer and the seller, because the money had already been transferred. Everything was ready to go except one minor thing. And they said, can we just get another 12 hours? We'll close tomorrow at noon. And
that's a great example. And let me jump in and tell you why it's a great example. When I say we, meaning the realtors, the salespeople, are so quick to use that as a negotiating tactic. Now, maybe the buyer or seller did tell you, don't bring me anything, don't say this, don't agree to that. And so you already know, because sometimes when I sit down and do my consultations, I know what my buyers will and will not do. But one thing I do not say is, never do I ever say, we're not coming to closing if you, and you fill in the blank. Because we are the representative of the buyer and seller. And then you open mouth, insert foot and say that, you've now put them in a situation of anticipatory breach. They're not going to be happy with you. Okay, because at the end of the day, our job is to communicate. We're the communicators and the connectors. There's no I in that. Okay, so when that happens, you have to explain to your buyer and seller, hey, if you have me go back and say that, let me explain what that means in the contract. We may be accused of breaching. I guarantee you, most of the agents walking this sidewalk, they've never heard the word anticipatory breach, and they do it every day. And so when an agent says it to me, I'll say, so are you anticipating breaching this contract? Well, no, I just want you to, but you just told me you're not going to come to closing. And I have to educate that way. So at the end of the day, we're usually the ones guilty of the anticipatory breach on behalf of our client. And that's a no-no. You know, so at the end of the day, you have to be a little bit more strategic as to how can we resolve this, and everything cannot be resolved. Sometimes it's just going to be a flat out termination. But usually I always tell everyone, you know what, if people just sleep on it for 24 hours, most of the time they will wake up on the other side of the bed and go, you know what, I just need to close. And especially we have the upper hand a little bit because of the rates. You know, I've got the U-Haul, you know, packed, and now we're at this whole whatever we're emotionally involved in, and we're days away from closing on Friday, and now everyone wants to spout different, I'm not going to do this type of thing. Cross your legs, look at your manicure, and wait 24 hours and see what happens. Althea just gave you an example. It's usually emotional. Go ahead.
Or sometimes even meeting at the property and getting the buyer and seller to meet, because once they meet, like, they realize that, hey, it's a real human being. And I don't know, I've just had that work for me in the past.
Yes, there's nothing wrong with that. For some reason, people think that they should never meet. I actually like it. You know why? The seller is happy. They put a face to a name. Hey, let me show you some hidden tricks in my house. You know, we've got this secret dungeon over here. Here's the door, you know, whatever. Here's how you turn off the water, that kind of thing. And that bonds them. You know, I think we as realtors and salespeople tend to create more problems in the transaction than need be, because I want to win, you want to win, everybody wants to win. It's not a win unless you're going to have a room in the house. It's between buyer and seller. We are the conduit. That's it. We make sure the paperwork's right. We make sure we get them to closing. We make sure everyone's happy at the closing table. And even if they're not happy, they are happy. Somebody's selling their house and someone's getting keys. They may not like the way they got to the table, but ultimately, if they make it to the table, there is some sense of happiness. They just may not show it on their face if it's been a tumultuous transaction. So I agree with you. If sometimes you just say, you know what, co-op agent, why don't we meet at the house Saturday and figure this out? Because everyone's a hero behind a computer, behind their cell phone, behind their email. But once you come together, that changes, because we're human beings. We're not meant to hide behind computers and cell phones and email. That's how we live. That's not how we're built. Make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Good. Tanise, what's going on in your world? We've talked a couple of times with success, I think.
What's going on? It's interesting that I was able to hop on. You talked about database. I had a conversation with Willie, and I'm going back cleaning up my database. I am definitely going to Ishamina's class this week so that I can go back to dealing with people I know. I'm actually going to a school today to meet with a principal to try to get a time that I can speak to the staff, maybe 10 minutes. So that's kind of where I am right now.
So what are you going to talk to the staff about?
So my goal is to simply share with them that there are programs available, and I have it on a list, a piece of paper, several programs that are available for educators. And if those programs are not for you, there are other programs that will allow you to be able to get into a home that could even include 0 down payments. So
Excellent.
that's
Excellent. That's what I wanted to hear. I wanted to make sure you knew about the teacher program. Actually, it's not called teachers program anymore. It's Heroes. So
Yes.
Heroes are the firefighters, police officers, and teachers.
yes.
And then also, you know, with FMLS and Georgia MLS, you can sign them up to get information about down payment assistance. So anytime you have a listing, you want to connect that link. That way, if someone looks at that listing, that DPA will show up and they can click on it and it'll show them all the programs that this particular county or this particular listing qualifies for.
Gotcha.
Then of course, you've got to find the lender that actually has the program, because sometimes all the lenders don't have all the programs. So
Right.
that's a good thing too. That's a great way to add to your database and have a touch.
Cool. Thank you.
You're very welcome, and congratulations. Good luck on that.
Thanks.
All right, we've got about 5 more minutes. Anybody else have a burning question during this birthday edition? No?
My only question is not a burning question other than, when do you leave for vacation?
Why does everyone want to know that?
Because you're important to us.
Oh, that's very nice of you to say. I'm a very secretive person when it comes to my vacation. Let me tell you why. My husband plans where we're going. So I've been at a closing before. My husband called and said, how much longer are you going to be there? Our flight leaves at 6. Excuse me? And so somebody asked me, well, what did you do? I said, well, my buyer's agent was with me at the time. And I said, I have to go. And he stayed and I came home. I didn't even ask where we were going, what I needed to pack. I just packed because I love to travel. And we ended up going to Puerto Rico. And so I did pack appropriately. And of course, my luggage was lost. Twice we've traveled and my luggage was lost. Paris and Puerto Rico, the P's. I have to be careful with the P's. Puerto Rico, I got my luggage in 2 hours. Paris, I never received my luggage. So my husband was not happy about that because I had to shop, which was fun. So usually it's around mid-month, which is why I'm doing Broker Chat early. Tom will do the next one, which is I think that week or the week after. And then he travels in September for his trip. And he's going to Paris.
Oh, nice. So am I.
Yeah. I'm not sure 100% where we're going. I was told Spain, but I'm not 100% sure that's where we're going. I don't really care. My bags will be packed and passport in purse, ready to go. Anyone else? Last question or comment? Anything you'd like to see us talk about, Tom or myself? I try to either have a subject matter during this broker chat, or I will bring a guest on. Sometimes I bring Ned, our legal counsel, to talk about the latest lawsuits, or probably overdue for that. Just so you know, this is August, so I'll probably start getting information about the 2024 contracts pretty soon here. I won't be able to teach any of it yet, but if you're new to real estate, our contracts change every January. We usually have a class in anywhere between October and November. Once I get the training contracts, and then we'll go over any changes. Before I usually do the changes, and then after the changes will be a full-blown class. So if you're in need of that, I believe I'm teaching in September. I think someone asked me to do that. I don't know when, but usually this is we're kind of back in our typical real estate market. For those of you that are going, this is the typical market. Yeah, this is typical, 30, 45 days on the market. In some pockets, it's still hot and multiple offers and over ask, but this is typical. The last 3 unicorn years were not typical. And our business is cyclical. So July is usually, or August is usually that, July, August is that month where everyone's focused on getting the kids back to school and college and so on and so forth. And then after Labor Day, things pick up again. So if you're a little bit slow right now, don't worry about it. Be prepared right after Labor Day. Kids are back in school. If they really needed to sell or really needed to buy, they're going to be motivated. So be ready.
Miss Deborah, this is Mika. I'm not sure if this has been discussed, but representing a buyer as a customer. And so I was the listing agent and represented the buyer as a customer, and then things started to go sideways. So when it comes to how to advise the buyer or lack thereof, and who should be advised the buyer when you're in that situation where you're representing both sides, that's something I would like to ask for clarification.
Okay, I'll mention it to Tom, and maybe he can do it in his session, because we're always looking for subject matter, and this is not really about us. This is about you guys. So we always want to make sure we're giving you good information, and we're talking about the things you want to talk about. So I'll send him an email and say, you know, that's a subject matter he'd like to hear about, because he loves to talk about, which he should, earnest money. We still have issues with the earnest money, and that's a big issue. But representation for both sides, customer versus client, all that, we can talk about agency for sure. Thank you for that. All right, well, I appreciate all that did attend for this birthday edition. I will be pretty much available until about mid-month. So if you need me, call me. Once I know I'm leaving, which day I'm leaving, I'll let Lee know and Jason know, so that you guys will probably have to take your broker calls to Tom, and he can answer any of your broker calls. If there's anything that you need from me between now and when I leave, feel free to give us a call. And I appreciate you guys attending today. Let's party.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy birthday.